Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists. This is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome into today's edition, this October 11th edition of Tracking the Tropics. We still have a little more than 2 months to go before hurricane season ends, and we are down to just 3 names on that list for this Atlantic season. That means it's still been active out there. We actually had Tropical Storm Sean form early this morning, so the Atlantic is still active. There's another area of low pressure behind it that we're tracking. And on today's edition, we're also going to be talking about a non-tropical area of low pressure that is going to impact quite a few people across the southeast. So again, welcome into today's episode. I'm meteorologist Amanda Holly here in your hurricane headquarters at the WFLA studios, also joined by WFLA meteorologist Rebecca Berry and today's featured meteorologist, WIAT Chief Meteorologist Dave Nussbaum. Thanks for joining us today, Dave.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon to y'all.
Right, yes. So, yeah, we have an active episode. You know, we're mainly going to be focusing on the non-tropical area of low pressure today, Rebecca, because that's what's going to be impacting a lot of folks over the next 48 hours.
Yes, a lot of times they do name things just so that it helps people draw their attention to them. It helps for when things have a name so you can really focus in on the area and you can reference it in conversation a little bit more easily. But sometimes systems without a name end up making similar impacts or even more so.
Yeah, and we're calling this one Rain Without a Name. Some much needed rain across a lot of the area. Unfortunately, it is going to come with the chance for some strong to severe storms as well.
Yes, and so here to break that down for us is meteorologist Amanda Holly. We're going to send her over to the wall quickly because there are a lot of dynamics at play here. We're talking about a ton of moisture. We're talking about a time of the year where we typically see fronts pushing through and how those may interact with all of that moisture. And if and when we do see the potential for some of that heavier, much needed rain, we're very excited to see when that might be. Amanda?
All of the tropics. We are going to start by looking at those couple of systems that are out in the Atlantic. Here's Tropical Storm Sean. It was a depression late last night, became a tropical storm early this morning. And then right behind Sean is an area of low pressure that just came off the coast of Africa trying to develop. It does have a low chance of developing. Luckily, I don't think either of these storms really are going to pose a threat to the United States. But those forecast models will show you that there are some disagreements in some of those forecast models as we go farther out in time. Some of them keep the storm moving on a little bit farther south of a track. And of course, that would be a little bit more concerning. We have to keep an eye on that. But some of them do recurve it out to sea pretty quickly. However, at the end of the day, it does look like I don't think that we're going to be impacted by this one because we're going to see a strong front come through in the next few days into the southeast United States, which will hopefully kick both of those systems out to sea. Now, this is a storm that has been in the Pacific. It was Hurricane Lydia out in the Pacific, but it just moved on shore and was sheared out pretty quickly by the mountain ranges there of Mexico. So it's not really a storm anymore. We're calling it the remnants of Lydia, but I'm talking about it because it is going to help fuel some shower and thunderstorm chances over the next couple of days in parts of the southeast. Here's why. We are currently looking at the subtropical jet stream. A lot of times in the winter, we'll talk about the jet stream that's up to the north. It bottles up the cold Arctic air to the north, and when we see those dips in the jet stream, that cold air comes down to the south. But the subtropical jet stream helps to pump in moisture from the Pacific, and then sometimes it can get a little bit active and help to bring storms, areas of low pressure that are not necessarily tropical across the Gulf of Mexico, and they can be enhanced by this subtropical jet stream. So what we're going to see happen over the next day or so is this massive showers and thunderstorms. Earlier this week, we were thinking it could have the low chance of developing into something tropical pretty quickly. But because this subtropical jet stream, those upper level winds in the atmosphere are moving it off into the Gulf of Mexico, across the Gulf very quickly, don't think it's going to become anything tropical. But we do think that it is going to bring all of this moisture in our direction across a lot of the southeast. We're not just talking about the Tampa Bay area here. We're actually talking a lot about the Gulf of Mexico region. And we are talking about the possibility of it bringing a lot of rainfall, again, much needed rain, but also the possibility of some stronger to severe storms. Now, the main threat is going to be in north central Florida and central Florida. This yellow shade here, that's a level 2 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center scale. So again, it's not tropical, but we are talking about it having some tropical characteristics in the form of it's going to be really humid outside and it's going to be really gusty. But some of the storms that it could produce and bring through our area will have the potential to produce some damaging wind gusts, and can't rule out an isolated tornado either. But let's talk about that rainfall, because that is what's much needed. Now, this is through Saturday evening, so it's not all going to fall at once, but we are talking about the possibility of 1 to 2 inches area-wide possible, with pockets of higher amounts, especially up in the Panhandle. That does look like where the heaviest of the rain is going to fall with this first system that comes through. And then, like I said earlier, we're actually going to see another push of some moisture on Friday and Saturday that will bring us a final round of rain and then some drier air. Here's what I'm talking about. This tropical moisture is moving across the Gulf of Mexico, and it is going to bring us those elevated rain chances today and tomorrow with that system. But Friday and Saturday, we're talking about this system kind of dropping in from the south, from the north, and it being a cold front. It's going to shove all that tropical moisture down to the south, and we're going to get in on some drier and cooler air, not just for portions of the southeast, but it does look like all of the southeast. So again, not a tropical system, but it is going to impact our area, and it kind of will feel a little bit tropical out there. So this one's not going to have a name. It is not going to be Tammy. That is the next name on the list, but look at that. We have already been through so many of the names on the 2023 hurricane name list this year, with Sean just forming.
Indeed. And so it does feel like one of those years where if we get some more decent activity, especially with those warmer sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, we may end up on the alternate names list just based on how things are going.
Yeah, so Dave, what are your thoughts on this system kind of crossing the state? We were talking a little bit before the stream. Your area in particular will also experience a little bit of rain, and we were talking there's a little bit of a drought there as well. So this might be beneficial.
Yeah, typically October is our driest month of the year, so this is not this is normal, I should say, for us to be dry. But much of September was dry too, and so with a lack of moisture here, you can see in the drought monitor map there, western Alabama is in that moderate drought. Eastern part of the state kind of dry, but you get to South Alabama toward the coast, we're talking about severe to extreme drought conditions going on. So this actually will be very good for us in South Alabama, getting about maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain. You showed it there. Coming in, so they'll be very welcome down there. Unfortunately, up here in Birmingham, they only get about 1/10 of an inch of rain in spots, so not really going to help out too much with this. But our neighbors to the southwest of us, Mississippi and Louisiana, they desperately need rain down there, which you don't really think. You know, usually they're wet all summer, but they actually had a dry summer, no tropical systems there. So a lot of fires broke out this past summer, and so they desperately need that wet weather too. And they're going to get a couple inches of rain potentially along the coast. But unfortunately, here in town, we won't see much. But like you said, while it's not a tropical system, these can act just like them. I mean, we're talking the heavier rain. You can have some gusty winds. We're going to have high rip currents here, at least the northern Gulf Coast area. And for y'all, it looks like potentially maybe some tornadoes.
Yeah, the possibility of those stronger to severe storms, certainly in central and north central Florida late tonight and early tomorrow morning as this system kind of passes through. Now, on tracking the tropics this year, Dave, we've talked a lot about the El Nino versus the sea surface temperatures, but this pattern that we're seeing develop right now with the subtropical jet stream and some moisture being transported from the Pacific across and turning into a low pressure, this looks a lot more like an El Nino pattern than we've seen for much of the season. So what are your thoughts on how that's all kind of evolved with this season so far?
We haven't seen too much El Nino-like weather, at least here in Alabama and southeast. I mean, very, very dry. But as we move to winter, typically we're kind of cold and wet here across the south. So it'd be interesting to see how we deal with it across Alabama. Maybe some snow. We've had snow in El Nino winters before here, so it'd be kind of unique to see nonetheless. Don't think you guys will have much down there in Florida, but it definitely could be a very wet winter, maybe down across the deep south. So that would be great with all the drought conditions we have going on right now, but just that big range that we had just stuck over the deep south and southwest this past summer just really, really baked those areas, and you can see exactly where on the map there. So right now, I think that moisture plume coming in, it's just south, but that starts creeping up a little bit higher north and kind of meeting up with the northern jet. And, we might be dealing with some interesting severe fall weather, or fall severe weather, I should say, across the southeast. So we'll have to wait and see. Our tornado season here in Alabama starts on November 1st and goes all the way till the beginning of May. Hopefully, though, it does stay fairly quiet for us. But there you see that subtropical jet, that moisture coming in. You get that southwest flow coming up here across the south. If that pattern persists, it usually leads to a lot of wet weather and a lot of cloudiness as we go throughout the fall months here and into early winter. So if this doesn't change, we could be in for a pretty soggy, maybe November and December.
And I just wanted to remind everyone watching, this is an interactive platform. You can ask a question and we'll be able to see it as long as you use one of the hashtags. They're just below our names on the screen, so it's hashtag #HeyAmanda. Start your question with hashtag #HeyDave or hashtag #HeyRebecca, and we'll be able to see your comments. We'll be able to display them on the screen, and we'll be able to answer them here for you. Because I know we are talking about some pretty nerdy stuff when we're getting into what we typically see an El Nino winter look like, but it's been so incredibly dry. Do you guys think an El Nino winter can catch us up in terms of rainfall before the spring fire danger?
It's possible. Like Dave, you were just saying, it depends really where that moisture stream just sets up. We have had a weird summer as well. Dave, you were just talking about that, where we didn't see any showers and storms. We didn't have our typical afternoon storm pattern on a daily basis. I mean, we had a couple of days in May where we were like, okay, here we go. Here's our rainy season. And then after that, it just kind of, it shut off. So it'll be interesting to see how this El Nino pattern, evolves into the fall and spring months because, well, one, we need the rain, so that's good that it's an El Nino pattern because typically it is a little bit wetter here, but unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword. It does come with that chance of stronger or severe storms with these fronts coming through. Typically, we do see quite a few more isolated tornadoes with these systems that move through, especially here in Florida as they track across the Gulf. So hopefully we won't go into our dry season, January, February, March, into a severe drought, but we already have that drought along the coast. I know our folks in Sarasota and Manatee County, and my mom lives in Sarasota, she's saying, where's the rain? It's so dry. So hopefully we'll see just some rain with these systems that come through.
Yeah, we don't need a ridge sitting over the Yucatan Channel all winter. Keep pushing that moisture too far north. I mean, it can't happen this time of year, but at least right now, if that subtropical jet just kind of holds steady, it won't be real pretty weather-wise, but at least it would maybe help with those drought conditions.
Yeah, could move up a little bit farther to the north. That'll help out the deep south a little bit more, but we'll see. We'll have to see. We'll have to end up seeing.
Just trying to ruin our weekend.
I know. To see what happens there.
Man, the conversation all season long has been about the fact that we were going into El Nino and we expected the shear versus the warm Atlantic surface temperatures. And so it just felt like such a weird year. It felt like the shear never showed up. And so that one conversation we've been having in the office is what other elements of El Nino moving into winter might be counteracted by the fact that we have the warmer sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, because we felt like maybe the shear was a little bit lighter because the temperature difference wasn't as great between the Pacific and the Atlantic. And so we're wondering if other aspects of the wintertime El Nino pattern might be impacted.
Will be different. Yeah, it's been kind of weird too. We had a late start to the Saharan dust season, kind of a late start to it ending. Typically by now we would start seeing, not as many tropical waves come off the coast of Africa, but that hasn't shut off yet. So it seemed like the whole season has been shifted a little bit. I wonder if we're going to see a little bit more active pattern still continuing into November. In November, we like to say we're quieting down. The storms that we see, they're usually not, as strong, but that might not be the case this year because everything just seems to be shifted a little bit.
Yeah, the wind shear has been there, but when you have, way above normal water temperatures, I think we've learned, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of papers about this as well too this season, that is more powerful than the wind shear to keep these systems going. I mean, we have 3 major hurricanes, even a Cat 5 out there in the Atlantic. So, it's just, and some of the shear, it's like the hurricane's like, I don't care. I'm just going to fuel off these 85, 90 degree water temps and just do my thing. At least most of the bigger storms stayed out at sea, fish storms,
Yeah.
with the exception, of course, Idalia. But still, nonetheless, though, it's going to be definitely one to read about down the road, kind of see what the research comes in with this. When we typically, like you said earlier, El Nino means, okay, we can kind of calm down, not stress so much about the hurricane season here across the Gulf South, and just maybe get a couple tropical storms come in here, we're good to go. But clearly this year is the exception to the rule.
Yeah, we've been, chatting about if this is going to be the new normal. If we go into an El Nino, in 5 years from now, go back into an El Nino, are we going to have to say, well, last time we had El Nino, we still had storms, so it doesn't really matter at this point. So it'll be interesting to see in like 10, 15 years from now what the patterns are doing.
I think it would be really interesting if they broke down the formation zones that we typically use by month by El Nino versus La Nina.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this year the formation zone in the Atlantic has been so much further north than it normally is, which contributed to a lot of those storms being fish storms. And so I would be interested if we could break down the tropical formation maps like this by the pattern as well.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I just put up the October tropical typical on average development zones, but like I said, we just had Tropical Storm Sean form. There's another invest area behind it. And obviously that's not anywhere near the October average development zone. So yeah, it's definitely strange.
Hey Dave, what's defined the season for you?
Well, fortunately, not much happened for us. But yeah, it definitely, looking at this here for October, I mean, the Cape Verde season, you kind of shut that down. I mean, when you get to October, I mean, I've always stressed working along the coast, you get August 15th, October 15th, that's your go month. Those 2 months there, you kind of stress out and everyone's on their edge. We haven't had too much to worry about this year with that. But I originally was thinking, okay, this past Christmas last year, 2022, we had single digits for low temperatures all the way through central Alabama and teens for lows all the way down to the coastline. And I was like, great, this is going to cool down the Gulf of Mexico. Clearly didn't make a difference for the season here. Granted, much of the eastern part of the Gulf got hit, but it's just there's just debunking any kind of rule out there, and it's all, I guess, while we may have had luck here across the U.S. coastlines, not too severe, except for the one. Not need to get those water temperatures cooler out there, and especially the Atlantic. And I don't know, we're get a pattern change coming, some more cold air kind of sneaking on in, getting more of those fronts across the Atlantic to drop those temperatures down as we get to this winter, looking ahead to next season. But at least the forecast right now for El Nino has it continuing through the winter into the spring. And then we'll have to see how next hurricane season shapes up. But I suspect with these warm water temperatures from the Gulf to the eastern seaboard, this season maybe go a little longer than we really want it to go. Our only hope is that they're more kind of a tropical storm or rainmaker versus anything else. You go back to 2020, and I was in New Orleans at the time. We had Hurricane Zeta, Cat 3, making landfall in southeast Louisiana, and that was just before Halloween.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those deals where you want to get rid of these systems here sooner than later. And usually that shutdown point is typically the beginning of November. But the way things look right now, the way the weather pattern is, the water temperatures, I think moving forward, we're going to have a little longer season than we both would like.
Yeah, and with that subtropical jet kind of in place where it's at right now, with the El Nino expected to continue through at least spring, we could be looking at a lot more of these rainmakers, rain without a name, have that tropical humid feel, but they bring in a lot of rain and just their areas of low pressure. They just don't have tropical characteristics. But for the everyday person, that doesn't really look any different outside their window when it's happening. But my question is, if we see more of these systems kind of cross the Gulf, are those going to help to bring our water temperatures down because of the cloud cover, the rain that they're going to bring? So that'll help, hopefully, to mix out some of that energy as well heading into next season.
And we do have a couple
that
of
ridge was
coming in. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
I was say that ridge just kind of sat over part of the Gulf of Mexico all summer, and it just baked. I mean, water temperatures were in the 90s. What was it? In the Keys, didn't it get up to 100 degrees there?
101, I think there was a buoy reading.
And that's the last thing you need.
Yeah.
So like you said, I hope that, if we get enough little systems coming through, even if they're not tropical, they're
Right.
just mixing up the water, they're churning it up. It's not great if you happen to be fishermen or, rig workers out there in the tropics or in the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico, but it would help to calm down the water temperatures a bit. That'd be useful.
Absolutely. And we do have a couple of questions coming in from our viewers. I want to remind you that you can use the hashtag #HeyRebecca, hashtag #HeyDave, or hashtag #HeyAmanda, so we're able to see your questions and display them here on the screen. So you do have to actually use those hashtags so that we're able to see them and answer them. And the first question coming in from George Stagner. Hey, somebody. That's a good one. How likely is this new tropical storm in the Atlantic to hit the Bahamas next week?
So I was just pulling up the forecast models for, well, we have Sean out there, right? And then we have that system behind it. And as I was kind of describing at the beginning of this episode, a lot of those forecast models, there's a big spread at the end there. So there is still some question marks exactly where this one will go and if it takes a little bit farther of a south track or a little bit turn quicker. But I think either way, the United States is okay because of that strong front that's going to come through on Saturday and push it kind of out to sea. But we'll be watching for it. The likelihood of it hitting the Bahamas or Bermuda. What was
The question was the Bahamas.
Bahamas. That's lower chance than Bermuda.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, weaker systems usually kind of take more of that westerly track across the Lesser Antilles and then into the Caribbean. It might just be a wave there. Versus if it was stronger. But yeah, that front coming in, if it gets caught a little further north latitude there, it'll just get swept out to sea.
Yeah.
And we have one more question. It's directed at hashtag #HeyRebecca, but I'm going to let you guys answer it, especially since Amanda's been doing the forecasting work all morning long. Hashtag #HeyRebecca, do you think there will be any power outages overnight in the Spring Hill area? And what she's talking about is the threat for severe weather that we do have in the Gulf overnight and into early tomorrow morning that Amanda was referencing earlier.
Yeah, so we do have that chance for some stronger to severe thunderstorms as this non-tropical system kind of crosses the state. Power outages, it's definitely possible if you get one of those isolated thunderstorms with a few strong wind gusts, topple a tree or two. Definitely not out of the question. We've been saying all morning that, not everyone is going to see the rain in this case because the cells that we're worried about are going to be very isolated. We're talking about scattered activity, especially for the next 12 hours through the activity that we're going to see overnight tonight. Tomorrow, we have a better chance of more people seeing rain. But the cells tonight, they're not going to impact everyone. So Spring Hill, if you don't get one of those strong thunderstorms that move through, you probably aren't going to see a power outage. But if you see a strong thunderstorm move through, some strong wind gusts, definitely possible for some power outages.
And that does also roll us into our next question, which is hashtag #HeyRebecca, how will Clewiston do on rain with this? And Clewiston is a little town on the southern end of Lake Okeechobee, right there in the middle of the state. And so it is going to be feast or famine, just like Amanda just said, with the rainfall on this. So I hope you do get some good rain in Clewiston. And our next question is hashtag #HeyAmanda. Could maybe this extend our winter-ish season as well? You were talking about how things are happening later. Do you think we'll have a later winter that lingers later into the spring with this?
It's definitely possible, Carly. When we talk about El Nino and our pattern and what that does to the overall atmosphere, and when we have an El Nino, on average, the southeast is a little bit cooler and a little bit wetter. Again, that's on average, January, February, March. Just, that doesn't mean we're not going to have dry days. It doesn't mean we're not going to have warm days, right? But on average, that's because we see more of these systems kind of move over us. So we have cloudier days with some of those cooler temperatures. And obviously, if the systems are moving over us, then we have wetter days and we end up with more rain than we typically would. So if it extends the winter season for us, well, I can't really speak to that. Possibly, I'm not expecting, freezing temperatures more often than not, right? But I'm talking about cooler than average because of that extra cloud cover around, but it's possible.
Especially since I feel like we didn't really get cold last year.
Yeah, it was very mild winter for us last year.
I think it's going to feel a lot different for us here in Tampa.
Yeah, just how it feels because we didn't see, we had a couple of really cold snaps there, a couple of cold days last winter here with our highs in the 60s, but there were few of them, just a couple of them. So if we see, on average a cooler year heading into our winter season, it's just going to feel different. It's going to feel like winter.
We got one more question asking about the Lakeland area. Is Lakeland going to see anything from this? And the severe weather threat is a lot lower for Lakeland. It's more of a coastal threat, as Amanda was explaining, with those kind of spin up water spouts and tornadoes.
Yeah, but Polk County's still in that level 2 out of 5 threat. So don't discount yourself from getting strong storms. It's definitely possible for you to see some of those storms. What we're going to see happen, our storms are going to develop in our southern zone. So we're talking Sarasota County, Hardee DeSoto, Highlands County. And then they're going to race north really tonight. So after about 4 or 5 o'clock, watch for some of those storms that are coming in from the south. And then overnight tonight, we could see another round kind of push through our area. And tomorrow we're going to see storms as well. So you got about 3 chances to see some of these stronger storms that come in.
And then I have a question for you, Dave, because you are in Birmingham. You get a lot more overnight tornadoes than we do. And we know that tornadoes are a particularly deadly threat in the South. We talk about all the time about, how do you get woken up by alarms? What's your message? Because you deal with this a little bit more often than even we do.
Yeah, the big thing we push out here is have multiple ways to get those warnings. I mean, weather radio, obviously the best one you can have. We have tornado sirens here. I don't think you guys have them down there, but they're not the best way to get that. I mean, at night you might hear it a little bit more than you would during the day. But the other is, have your cell phone fully charged before you go to bed, because those WE alerts or wireless emergency alerts will go off, and that'll wake you up. I mean, just the test we had last week. I mean, as many people say went off if you're napping or whatever, it just gives you the idea of how loud those can be, which is obviously designed for that. And the other thing we tell people is be a hero. If you're watching coverage and you see there's a tornado warning, pick up the phone and call your friends, family, whomever, say, hey, look, tornado's headed your way. Albeit some of the ones you get, the tropical type, if you will. I mean, they're not long track, huge tornadoes like we typically see here, but it still can do damage. Damage is still a pretty good damage down there, or for anyone for that matter. So yeah, it's just to have multiple ways. Just make sure if this is tonight, your phone's charged before you go to bed on your nightstand or even under your pillow. Some people do, and just be able to get those updates. And obviously keep it tuned to y'all there at WFLA, and I'm sure you guys will be on air. If there's tornado warnings, I'm sure you'll be there regardless of the hour, just like we do here. So that's kind of like the big takeaway from that. It's just have multiple ways to get those alerts.
Excellent. Amanda, we're going to start to wrap things up because the questions are slowing down here. What are you watching for this week in the tropics, and what are your thoughts on moving forward for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I'm going to continue to kind of weirdly keep an eye on the coast of Africa to see how many more of those tropical waves come off the coast, but hoping that most of them recurve out to sea like they have a lot this season. But also going to be watching for the systems now in the Gulf and kind of tracking across the state, whether they get a name or not from the National Hurricane Center. And then the chances for us having, a strong storm or two with these systems as they come across. So watch for this to continue, not just through the end of hurricane season, but these systems kind of crossing the Gulf. This could potentially be a pattern that we'll be looking at for several months ahead. So we'll be watching for that as El Nino continues to kind of evolve out in the Pacific and affect our weather patterns.
And Dave, we're going to appreciate you so much for joining us. We're going to give the floor to you. What do you think about this season, and what are you watching for moving forward?
Well, look, it's kind of taking what Amanda said there. Yeah, these waves, as long as there's African monsoon keeps producing those waves, they're going to come into the Atlantic, and hopefully there's enough of them to start turning up the water and starting to knock those water temperatures down. Traditionally, that season of those waves kind of shuts down as we get to the second half of October and November. But echoing also with the Gulf, we need to keep an eye on that. That southwest flow that's be setting up out there, that moisture plume coming off the Pacific. I know the models are hinting at a few more hurricanes developing in the Pacific. And while those won't necessarily survive their track across Mexico, it will help to bring us that added moisture that we need for that, heavy rain threat potentially, and some maybe drought busting rain in some spots from Texas, Louisiana, across the deep South. But unfortunately, you guys are all like, as they say, sticking out like a sore thumb down there. These little systems of waves kind of coming by. We hope they're just not tropical, but continue to bring guys a little bit of some rain and much of the southeast as well too. So I don't see the weather pattern calming down in the near future for especially the coastal areas. I think we'll get these big ridges of high pressure coming in from the northern part of the country and clipping down where I am in Alabama, but I think it'll push all that moisture farther south. And until that pattern changes, typically, once we get in toward the Thanksgiving timeframe, You may get some active weather along the coastal areas. So that could be good for some and maybe too much for others.
Always a double-edged sword with weather. With one thing, there's always another, right? Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us on today's edition of Tracking the Tropics. So, of course, we're always looking ahead to something, always tracking something. You can always watch previous episodes as well on our YouTube page. You can listen to them on your favorite podcast streaming service. But our past episodes are also on trackingthetropics.tv. So a lot of times we'll talk about an evergreen topic that, doesn't necessarily, if we have a quiet week, right, and we're not tracking anything tropical that week, we might talk about a little bit of a different topic on how to prepare, stuff like that. So you can always search through that, peruse that on trackingthetropics.tv. But I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you, Dave, so much for being our featured meteorologist today. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and of course, for myself, Rebecca, and Dave, we'll see you next time.
Find Tracking the Tropics on these platforms. And for storm updates, the latest models, and helpful resources, visit trackingthetropics.tv.